Welcome to the Natasha Helfer Podcast. To help keep this podcast going, please consider donating at natashahelfer.com and share this episode. To watch the video of this podcast, you can subscribe to Natasha's channel on YouTube and follow her professional Facebook page at Natasha Helfer, LCMFT, CST-S. You can find all her core resources at natashahelfer.com. This podcast addresses many topics around mental health and sexuality. It may not be suitable for minors. Some topics may elicit a trigger or emotional response, so care for yourself accordingly. The intro and outro music for these episodes is by Autocrate.
Hello, everybody. This is Natasha Helfer. I am the host of the Natasha Helfer podcast, where we try to combat shame through all kinds of things: stories, education, research, etc. We are not fans of shame. And with me today, I'm super excited to have Evelyn, and I would like for her to introduce herself. I mean, she's given me a great bio, but I think it's always more fun to listen to the person introduce themselves. And the reason why we're here today, just to give you a little bit of an overview, is that she is a former member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, has been a member until this year. And she was invited by one of her friends to sing in the choir and wanted to participate in her community and was not allowed to do so because of her status in the church. And so we're here to talk about why those kinds of things matter, what sometimes some of the pushback is, and why some people maybe wonder, why is this a surprise or a big deal, and why other people understand very deeply why this is a big deal and why it's so difficult to be part of a community for so long, a faith community for so long. And then when things shift or beliefs shift or things happen that don't make it a good fit anymore as far as a place of worship, how that ostracization from the community can be so painful. So that's what we're here to talk about today. Welcome to the show, Evelyn.
Thank you, Natasha. Thank you for the invitation. Okay, so I'm Evelyn.
So I want you to tell us all about yourself. Like, tell us all about your story and everything you're about.
Okay, I was raised in the church. I grew up in New Mexico in a little town. I had 5 brothers, and I'm the only girl. And very active, early morning seminary. I went to a little college in Arizona and did the Institute program. That's where I met my husband. We were freshmen. He went on his mission. He served in Taiwan. And then we met up again at BYU, where I studied English literature and had a wonderful time there. Loved my professors, loved my roommates, loved everything. So fun. But winters were hard. So as soon as I graduated, we got married and we moved back to New Mexico, where my husband went to school and got his bachelor's degree. And I got my master's degree in public health while having children. Sort of did both, and we lived on student loans, and we did it that way. We spent 6 months in China, Beijing, China, where we did a study abroad, and I kind of saw different parts of the world. I'd done study abroads at BYU and had been to England, and so I thought I was like well-traveled, So I was going to go to Beijing and go to the museums. That was in my mind.
I love it.
Hey, baby. It was a very different experience. I realized how kind of entitled I was, I guess, as an American, and how I thought human qualities, things that I were like, the value for independence and individuality, that was not the same in Chinese communities. I remember one time we were in a subway station and everyone was just going through this gate. I'm like, why aren't they using this other gate? And it was just like conform, blend in. And there was historical reasons for that. So anyway, it just like brought into my horizons. And it was one of the first times I didn't fit in was in Beijing, but I did fit in my branch. And I loved going to church every Sunday and just clung to those branch meetings and my little green hymn book and my language that I knew, and had a great time there. Let's see, I raised my family. I have 5 children, and we've lived in New Mexico and then Nebraska, and then now we're in San Antonio, Texas.
Okay.
Small town, Nebraska.
I lived right under you in Kansas for a long time. So
Oh, did you were you in a small town or a big town, Natasha?
I was in a bigger town. I was in Wichita, so it's the
Okay.
largest city really in Kansas. Yeah.
Yeah. I once again I was reminded how much I do not like winter.
And it is cold there. I
It
don't know
was
that
so
people understand how those winds are. They get very chilly in the Midwest there for sure.
very chilly in the Midwest. Yes. I struggled.
Yeah.
And I did long distance running through the winters even.
Oh,
So
wow. Yeah.
that's how I made my way. I have depression. It sort of developed as a young adult, early adult, like early marriage kind of time. And so I've dealt with that throughout my adult years through therapy and medication. And it's a roller coaster, but I do okay.
Okay. So right off the bat, we're getting a sense that you're raised in this community. This is your faith community. This is your worldview. These are your beliefs. This is a really important part of your identity. You love the church. You're involved in the church.
Fully in. Yes.
Sure.
Even though I recognize there's some problems, as people do along the way, it's okay. I can put those on the shelf. I can put them on the back burner because there is so much good. And I am here for my kids and I am working towards my eternal family.
Yeah. And I'm not sure we've been totally clear. I think a lot of my audience comes from my similar background, but we're talking about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, right? Which is also known as the Mormon Church.
Mm-hmm.
And for those who don't understand as much about Mormonism, it's a type of church that's considered high demand. And what that typically means is that it's fairly conservative, and it also demands a lot from their members in order to be considered either worthy or involved or kind of an active member of the community. So when you're talking about loving your church community, it's a dedication. It's a lot of time you're spending, a lot of volunteer money, it's tithing monies. You're dedicating a lot of your life. And I think we'll maybe talk about this a little bit in the future, but when we leave the church, either through our own devices or like for me when I was excommunicated, I think that's part of why it's so difficult, because of the great amount of dedication and investment that we placed in this community, all the energy we gave, the monies we gave, the time, the identity. Yeah.
Yes. And the thing that I was taught about people who left, the words that were used were lazy learners, or lost their testimony, fallen off the path,
Apostate.
wanted to sin, maybe wanting to maybe drink alcohol or try things that aren't allowed in the church, or want to wear the things that the church doesn't say. So that was the framework that I these were not the good ones, right? Like this wasn't who I wanted to be. I wanted to be valiant and in.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So now I know being who I am now, and I wish I could have understood better. I couldn't have. I mean, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
I wish I could have understood the bravery and that I'm still the same person, and a lot of the values that I was taught in the church are what led me to the place that I am now. And it wasn't lazy learning. It was so much study, so much thought, so much faith that has brought me to the place that I am now. And I wish that I would have, I couldn't have known it, but I hope that maybe people can understand that. This isn't like an easy choice or a lazy choice or a sinful choice. This is a faithful choice, a deliberate choice, and a loving choice.
Yeah. And I think that is hard many times for people within the community to see it that way. I've been through a similar journey in some ways to you. And I remember thinking those things of people who left, right, when I was in. And then when you go through an experience and you realize, oh, this is different than what I had thought about, sometimes it's hard to have that perspective, like you're saying, unless you've gone through it yourself. But also why we're always calling for compassion, and it's interesting because the church itself calls for compassion. And yet, and this is a little bit of what I'd like to talk about too, is the duplicity, because on the one hand, the church will say it's important to love our neighbors. It's important to, be loving and compassionate even to people who don't agree with us or don't believe like us. And then on the other hand, we have experiences like we're going to talk about with you today, where there's quite a bit of rejection that happens when that occurs. So can you talk just briefly, like maybe give a 5 to 10 minute version about that faith kind of transition for you? What were the things that maybe went into that for you? What were you thinking? What's things, you go from this very devoted, you're raising your babies, you're holding on to that green hymn book, like you said. How do you go from there to earlier this year resigning from this church?
Some of the things that went into that for me are having queer children. I did speak about this on a podcast with Latter-day Struggles with Valerie Hammaker. So if people want to look up episode 105 on Latter-day Struggles, you can listen to more about that. But I have a bisexual child who came out first, and then that one was even okay. Put it on the shelf. It's fine. She could still marry a man. But the transgender child who came out about 2 years ago, that was different. That one, he came out and let me know he wasn't going to go to church anymore. And when he said that, I was like, I wouldn't want you at church, which is a surprising thing to say to a child I love dearly and want forever. That church I knew wasn't a safe place for a transgender child, and we'll figure this out, but it won't be through church. So that was where my shift started to happen. But still, I thought that I would bring all of the light and knowledge that I was learning from these amazing doctors and medical professionals and share them with my church community. Wouldn't they be so happy to have more light and knowledge on the queer community? And so I would speak up in Relief Society meetings, and I joined like the emotional resiliency course and shared the things that I was doing and learning with my child, and just was like so optimistic that I would be the change, that I was put in this position to be like a different kind of pioneer for the church. So I did that for about a year, spoke like at a Stake Relief Society meeting about how the church made space for queer youth if they wanted to keep showing up because everyone was so kind and used the right words and pronouns. So did that. And then I was on Girls Camp Stake Camp Committee here, which is kind of a big deal because it's a big stake and Girls Camp is a big deal, and felt pretty cool about it. So I was planning that, and I was really working hard against having a dress code at that time. The FSY standards hadn't changed yet to less restrictive. So we were still working with those guidelines of girls can't wear tank tops and stuff. So I was just working really hard to like, can we please not judge people for what they wear? Can we just love them? That would be really great for me. And I ended up having my own daughter. I mean, I raised her. I shouldn't have been surprised. But she did not want to change out of her tank top. It was 105-degree weather. She has sensory issues. She was really struggling with her anxiety. She said, if I'm going to be here, I need to be comfortable. And so the first day she did change. The second day she said, I changed yesterday. That didn't feel good. I'm going to just keep on what I'm wearing today. And they sent her home, which was devastating to me. To cast out this girl who was struggling so much hurt my heart, and it hurt a lot of the hearts of the women I was working with. Like, no step of this was I alone. It's not like I'm the only one talking. There are people, people have hearts. Like, they can see pain and can feel what is true and right, and we all have the same theology, like Jesus loves people. And would we cast stones at a little girl in a tank top, or would we say, he without sin cast the first stone? So the working through all this with support from friends who are still members now. Love them. Love these women. And that is why I still want to sing in church. That is why, Natasha, because I still love people. But so I came back the next day wearing a tank top, and they didn't find it adorable, Natasha. The leaders did not find it adorable that I would support my child in that way. It was, we changed our shirts, we finished the day out, and I thought, it's fine. We're going to work, like everyone will say their sorries and move on. And the stake did not. the stake leadership did not do that. They doubled down. My daughter started early morning seminary, same daughter. She wore a tank top the first day of seminary. Like, it's tank top, it's Texas, y'all. Like, wear tank tops. And I got a call from my bishop saying she cannot wear this to seminary. This isn't girls' camp. This is worse. She can't wear it or she's going to be sent home. And do we say shit on this podcast?
Oh, you can say whatever you would like.
Okay, so Evelyn lost her shit at this time and went ballistic. And I didn't care who heard or saw me. This was an injustice that was so wrong to me. It was actually worse than girls' camp to me, because this is, now we're casting her out of a building of worship from an optional activity at 6 a.m. and saying she can't go because her shoulders are showing. So I called everyone I could call. They ended up saying we probably shouldn't. Like, they had a little high council meeting. All the men got together in the clubhouse and decided maybe we shouldn't have kids dismissed from activities for what they're wearing, which is a great choice. But I don't know. I didn't feel better about it because I knew that from the beginning. I knew that, like, why do we have to have a meeting about it? I don't know. Even though I'm glad they changed the policy and this is going to be better for people in the future, it just left a really bad taste in my mouth that I had to work so hard and have pushed so hard for something that was plain as day to me. But through those experiences, I got courage and realized I can trust my own intuition and authority. The next general conference, they changed that dress code. And it was like, of course they did. It was a bad dress code. But even if they hadn't, it wouldn't be okay to cast people out.
Yeah. Right.
Why cast people out?
Well, and it's such an interesting, again, contradiction, right? It's like we have all of these scriptures and theologies and thoughts about come unto me, come unto Christ, let the children come, especially the children, the minors, and we are also living in a time where it is, I don't think anybody's surprised that kids are not really super gung-ho about going to church, in general, throughout the country. And so you would think that if anybody would show up in any way, we'd be like celebrating that, like, woohoo, you're here.
And I do think there are areas that do that. I think this is kind of unique to my geographical region and leadership structure. Because I have friends, we're Mormons, we have friends all over, and they're horrified that this happened. They know this would never happen where they live with the leadership they have. So I think it is a bit unique, but also shows like an underbelly of something that's not good.
Well, it's interesting that you say that. I do agree with you. I think that there are pockets, but in general, I think that there's a reason why this exists. And having, I was a military brat. I lived all over the United States. I've been in all different kinds of wards. And I would say that the wards that you're talking about that are more flexible are in the minority of the ones that I've been in. And yes, when you get to Texas and the Midwest and you get to Utah and, maybe some of the more flexible wards would be like on the East Coast, Washington, D.C. area, maybe
Las Vegas, Nevada, maybe
Las Vegas, maybe California. And even in California, it depends, right? Where you're kind of at, how north you go, et cetera. And so, and what I've kind of, because it's interesting that you started by saying you weren't alone in this distress.
I was not.
Right? You had friends,
and it was women.
Church. You have other members of the church who kind of agree with you. And I always remember, when I would teach in Relief Society or whatever, and I would be maybe talking about something a little bit controversial, I could usually see kind of the younger women or the, all nodding and then sometimes the older women or the more conservative women would be like very stark and kind of giving me their scowly faces, like you're doing something improper. And who tends to win in these arguments is the conservative folks in our structure. And that's because when you go to the top, that's really what's happening, right? There's not, we see this every general conference. Every general conference, there are messages of inclusion, of love. You can kind of tell who the flexible speakers are, but then you get to the very top and there's some pretty, strict, like if you don't comply, if you don't adhere, if you don't, then you're really going to not belong. And I mean, even to the very top, Elder Nelson has been pretty clear about drawing a line. If you don't,
I wonder if this is what Think Celestial looks like.
I think that's the big problem and why everybody's struggling with this whole celestial issues. Does think celestial mean that we think expansively and inclusively and in ways that we have mystery and abilities to understand the universe? Or is think celestial, you have to follow every single tiny rule we as Mormons think is important to, get to the celestial kingdom?
Yeah. Or does think celestial mean have a temple recommend to sing at the end?
Right, which is the other way to say that. So which then things like shoulders showing matter because you're having to follow strict standards. And this is again what's meant by high demand religions, is that there's these strict adherence to certain standards. That's more important. It's more act centric than relationship centric.
What does actocentric mean, Natasha?
Just act, not acto.
Oh, act.
Centric. So meaning the acts matter. I have to follow the rules. I have to cover my shoulders. I have to pay my tithing. I have to, take
we
the
show our love for God by following these rules.
Following the commandments and the rules and the guidelines, versus a lot of what I think the New Testament is about is like, are these rules really helping us have better relationship and better community? Like it's just so classic in the New Testament, right? That Jesus was constantly being, monitored by people. You're breaking this rule and you're breaking that rule. And how many steps did you take on the Sabbath to heal that person? And Jesus is like, well, isn't it more important that we heal the person, right? So he's more like relationship centric, right? Whether you believe in him literally or symbolically or whatever, that's fine. But that's the tension. And it seems like in our church, the tension still leans towards act-centered dogma instead of relationship-centered issues.
In my experience, with the leadership, yes.
Yes, right.
Yes.
And the leadership is usually under the bigger leadership who has all these things. So, okay, so and it's interesting to me also that you are giving me in Texas, no less, the story that your non-binary or your transgender child was actually treated kindly, and that their pronouns were respected and
went on the stake trek as a young man.
Wow, because that's unique.
It was unique.
So that's unique on the
very well with him,
right? Because, and I was just presenting this to the Utah chapter of ASECT, which are the sex therapists, because many of them are not LDS, Latter-day Saint, or Mormon. And so I was just educating them on some of the things that the church says. And so I brought up the website for the church. And right now on the website, it says church leaders counsel against, of course, elective medical or surgical intervention, but also leaders counsel against social transitioning.
Which would be why I would never recommend for anyone to counsel with a church leader regarding these issues.
Right.
Please do not.
And it's also why I'm surprised that your child was allowed to go on trek and that people were able to support your child in such a way.
Well, you've met his mother, so if he wanted to go, he would be going.
Well, and at the end of the day, if the church is ever going to change, it's because of the mothers and the advocates and the friends, right? And all the people that you're saying show up with that compassion, but it's usually not in leadership. It's usually grassroots.
And I had to do so much work, Natasha, to find my voice and be brave enough to stand up for my children, knowing that people are going to be unhappy with me. I was raised to be pleasing and to be submissive and to go with the flow and to support my leaders and not speak of the ill of the Lord's anointed. I have had to overcome all of that conditioning to be able to show up now, and it still hurts. Like I'll cry, and it's very difficult disappointing my parents and knowing that people I love are going to be confused by this and maybe be put in the middle of something that they never wanted to be put in the middle of. I don't like any of that. It's not pleasant for me.
Yeah.
but it's the right thing to do. So
It's not pleasant for most of us, right? But I think you're right that you have the added conditioning as a woman in the church to be quiet, to be kind, to be polite, to be supportive, especially of male leadership. So to speak up when you are, in the body of a female, that's even more difficult than I think it's difficult for anyone, but even more difficult for a female voice. And I would like to just kind of commiserate or just allow for you to talk a little bit more. I was upset about a lot of things for a long time, and even how I was treated as a woman and how I saw other people being treated, and gay people and all these, especially as a therapist, and all these people I was treating, and they were all being treated in certain ways by the church. But boy, is there something different when it's your own flipping kid. Even, the rage and the fury and the sadness and the grief and the torment, I think that when my child was, for you, it was track and camp. For my child, it was basically being released as young women's president due to their orientation and to some of their beliefs, but they were still being very appropriate in their way that they were showing up in church. Appropriate meaning following the rules.
yeah, we know what to do. We're not crazy.
Yeah. And so when they did that, that hit me in a very tremendously different way. Do you resonate with what I'm saying?
Yes. Like the mama bear thing, and then how we're now mama dragons because it's even bigger and fierier, for sure. It was like, I don't care what the consequence is now. Like, this is so wrong. This is my kid. I know my child. I know the goodness in them. I know all of the things that they've been taught. And if they tell me that this is the way it is, then this is the way it is. And we can all, if they're just saying what they need, all they're saying is what they need. And if we can't meet them with what they need, then like, what are we here for? What's the point of it all? If you say I'm hurting, and then people say, no, actually, you're not hurting. That's not what hurting is. Pain is whatever, like whatever rationale there is for, like, my daughter not wanting to change out of her tank top. Like, even if, okay, let's play this thing. Like, okay, the tank top was evil. Let's just pretend. She should still get to stay because she is a child and she is learning and growing, and we love her through it. We do not send her away.
Right. The sending away is the ostracization that causes so much shame and causes so much fury and
trauma
and causes the divide to be bigger. I don't know where they have the sense that, oh, if we do this thing, somehow that will correct the behavior. Even if it corrects the behavior temporarily, right? I remember being sent home once for having too short of a skirt at BYU. So it definitely corrected me temporarily. I went home and put on pants, right? And came back. But it left an indelible moment that separated me, that was difficult to come back and feel.
I think it's hard because you either have to choose between yourself, like, was I wrong to wear that? I didn't think I was, but they said I was. So now we're doubting ourselves in every question we make, and the goodness of our body versus or the community. So do I push my own self away, or do I push my community away? And I think that's where it gets really stressful.
Yeah, right. And yeah, I remember coming home from that day and being surprised at the sobbing and the howling that was coming out of my body. Right. And I think it was just this moment where it's like, this community, this faith, this, even this God, right? It just represented everything that I have given everything to, is now turning around and hurting my kid. Right? When I'm actually bringing my kid to this place so that it will be protected and loved and grow. And that was something like, so when I hear you talk about this, I get that same sense.
Yeah. And then the thought that I had was like, then you don't get them. Then you don't get my kid.
Exactly.
I'm not bringing them to you anymore.
That's exactly what we did. We went from being active that day, fully active, to not going back. And that was shocking, even to us. we were from one week to the other. We were like, we can't take our kid to a place that hurts them.
No, you cannot.
No, you cannot. So this sounds like a big part of your faith transition, of deconstructing kind of your faith, your beliefs, moving into kind of it seems like a different type of values system and different belief system. Yes.
Yeah, I just have to do what is right for me. And so I lost my faith in the leadership, knowing that the leadership, it said the things you said. You shouldn't socially transition, you shouldn't medically transition. And me knowing, well, that's wrong. That's not the right call. So what else are you wrong about?
Mm-hmm.
The SEC issue was a big deal for me. My husband's an accountant, so honesty, integrity, big deal. And I mean, we struggle with money. So you're sitting on a layer of it, like that doesn't feel good. And then BYU professors being dismissed and disciplined for being LGBTQ affirming, very problematic for me. That people's profession at a place I love, at a place that taught me the values and taught me, I had to take American heritage. So I had to learn about how power corrupts in that class, and that we have to have checks and balances. And now you're doing this. You taught me that's wrong. That's not okay. Yeah.
That, I think, is one of the biggest ironies, is that the many things that we were taught about honesty, about transparency, about virtue, well, that comes back to kind of bite them in the butt when they don't perform in the same way, right? Like they taught us to stand up for truth and righteousness.
You did. You told me to stand alone, even if I have to stand alone. Okay.
Right. And so, yeah, that always kind of comes to mind too, is that I believe and still believe in those things, you know.
I do too.
Advocate. I'm willing to stand alone. I'm willing to be ostracized a bit, you know, because beliefs really matter, and advocating for people who need advocacy really matters. Right.
I will do what is right. Let the consequence follow.
Exactly. That's
Yeah.
exactly.
So I was invited to sing with a friend. It was a quartet. I'll correct your thing. It wasn't the choir. Last year I conducted the choir and wrote the entire Christmas program. So this year I've always participated in Christmas music. It's a big deal for me as a person and my family. And so when the invitation was extended by a friend to sing with her in church on Christmas Eve, I actually said, can I have a day to think about it? It wasn't an automatic yes. I needed to think about it because I haven't been in church for a while, and I just didn't know how I would feel going back into that space. So some of the things I weighed were, am I going to be able to do it? Will I have like a trauma response? Will it be okay to see everyone? I wonder what the song will be. I won't have a say in that. How will I feel doing it? And I kind of played out, well, it could go really bad. I could hate it. I could back out. I could have an awkward interaction with someone. And I thought, but what if it's good? What if I go and have a beautiful experience and look out and see all these people I love and have a moment with God? What if that's what happens? I said yes for that. What if? What if it's good? And then I was told it was a quartet, which is a little different than what I thought, but I'm like, okay, that's okay. And I love Sally DeFord. That's fine. What Child Is This is one of my favorite songs. So that was the song we were going to be singing. They were like, does your husband want to play? He plays the piano. They lost a pianist when we stopped going. It was really sad. So he was willing to, accompany, and we were making plans. And then the communication kind of stopped, which is fine. We had plenty of time. And then I got a text from my bishop. Well, first he tried to call me, and then he texted me and said he needed to talk to me about the Christmas program. The Sacrament Meeting Christmas program was his verbiage. I'm like, he never called me. He hasn't called me in 6 months. Are you going to tell me I can't? So I just texted him back, are you going to tell me I can't sing on Christmas Eve? He's like, oh yes, thank you for understanding. It's like, I don't understand that. This is not what I was expecting. It's very surprising. It was actually really hard for me to say yes. It's like, yeah, well, I'm glad your family's doing well. Thank you for understanding.
Wow.
I don't understand. I don't understand that. I thought visitors were welcome. Wouldn't I be showing up as a visitor? Why would it be different for me? Why is it different, Natasha, for a former member?
I'll tell you why it's different, because I think from their perspective, if they welcome you, if they treat you like you're a normal person, if they treat you with respect and dignity, somehow that turns into we support her decision to leave. Which I
Maybe
think,
we should support my decision to leave.
well, and exactly right. And I may support isn't the right word. It's kind of like what's the
Honor that. We honor your path.
There's another word I'm thinking of that so this happens to my brain. I can't think of the word I want, but it's almost like, by saying no, they discredit you. If they had said yes, they would have validated your decision. Like, oh, you can still be a valid person out there in the world, even though you've rejected us. And the church can't do that. The church cannot allow for there to be different paths that are good. And I think that they have this horrific fear, which I think, again, is biting them in the butt, that if they validate you in any way, shape, or form, then other people will be more apt to follow your path. People are following your path anyway. The church is losing members. All churches are losing members of of their congregations.
Really?
And they actually don't understand like human psychology, that it's actually when you do that, you actually make it worse, right? That if they would be more accepting, if they would make it more welcoming, if they would say, yes, we can be in relationship with this sister that has been part of our community, even though she's chosen a different path that is a better fit for her, then they would actually probably have people stay even more. But it's just this weird thing that they're so afraid that if you show up there smiling with your beautiful voice and being an example of being a good human being, not in the church, what influence are you going to have?
Interesting thing is, Natasha, I didn't tell anyone I resigned. I would have just been showing up. Like my friend who asked me, she didn't know I was a former member. I was just her friend who hasn't been at church for a while. So it could have, and I wouldn't have said anything. I would have just sang the song and then said my story when I was ready. I hadn't told my parents yet. That was a conversation I would have liked to wait to have. So then it forced my hand, because why can't Evelyn participate in sacrament meetings? That's weird. What did she do? Who did she adultery?
Well, right, because your Latter-day Saint friends are going to make assumptions about why you're not being allowed to participate.
Yes, but they're also not going to ask me because I hadn't shared that information with them. So now they're prying.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a big flipping mess when we have these systems that within the system organization, you other, and we're very good at othering in the church. And
I find myself fighting against it even now, because I'm like, just recently on Facebook, I went to bat for Mormon Jesus. I had like a friend who's joined a born again Christian group who was like, Mormon Jesus is bad. I'm like, maybe even maybe like real Jesus also encompasses Mormon Jesus, and like we can respect each other's faith. That was me earlier in the week defending my LDS friends and their faith from another othering. So I don't want to other. I just don't want to. It's not something, it's not a value I want to have.
Yeah. Well, and I think at the end of the day, it kind of goes back to the principles I was talking about. We can't have our cake and eat it too. We can't say, oh, we want to be all inclusive and love everyone and act like we are the only right way to do things. And if you don't do it exactly how we say or think you should, then we're going to other you. You can't have both ways.
Yeah.
And I think that's a line the church and a lot of the members are trying to straddle on a regular basis. I know I was trying to straddle that, when I was a member as well. And you just can't have it both ways. You either have to choose inclusion and be uncomfortable and allow for diversity and allow for expansion, or you have to believe that this is the one way. And then you get into these othering techniques that happen and that we're quite good at, and in such dismissive ways, right? Like even what your bishop texted you seems very short and dismissive. Like, thank you for understanding. It's very passive aggressive. That's passive aggressive behavior.
I had a friend on my Facebook thing say, Mormons are the nicest assholes. Isn't that the truth? Oh, and I heard your family's doing so good. Like, what?
Yeah, we haven't checked in on you or ministered to you in months, but
Not at all.
yeah, and of course we can laugh and we can make light and we can try to understand, but at the heart of it, like where does this leave you? Where does this leave you kind of from an emotional perspective? And
I just don't know how to show up there again. Like now it really did draw a line. Like I don't know how to move on from this. It was so well intentioned to want to go. Like I love my Relief Society sisters. How could I show up for them again? And I know they would love to have me. I'm the same person.
yeah, when I think about it from the construct as a family therapist, we're a family, and the parental figures are actually not helping us siblings, do the work of integration. They're actually separating us out. We've seen that in a lot of public school systems too, like, oh, these kids will go to this class and these kids will go to that class. And now they're realizing, oh, when we make these separations, these others, it has implications of how the group can be united. And so then we are a broken family.
Yeah, we're a broken family. Like, and if people have to choose, and it leaves me, if people have to choose church or me, they're going to choose the church. I know that. That's sad.
Well, and why?
And
Yeah.
in their defense, it'd be like, because I chose to leave it, right? Like, yes, I left the membership, but I didn't leave my love. Like, I didn't break the love that I have for it. Or the hope that I have that it'll be a better place. Or my willingness to serve. None of those things left with the resignation of my membership. Like, that's personal why I resigned. I don't have to share that, and it doesn't matter.
Well, and even that train of thought, I think, ignores all the ways that we are connected. Because, I mean, my family was converts. I don't know where you come from. If you come
I'm
from,
like pioneer heritage for the ever.
so there's no resignation. There's no excommunication
No.
that can sever the bonds of blood and history and ancestry and family. And it does, and even me as a convert family, that we were adopted into that, and it's like an adoptive kid. You can't sever that just by saying, oh, here's a piece of paper that now rescinds this particular part of your membership. I mean, that's very legalistic.
Oh,
Right?
isn't it like a contract?
Mhm.
Ignoring like all the ingredients that went into me both through DNA and conditioning and indoctrination and my education and everything. Like I'm a if I'm a Mormon, I'm a baked Mormon muffin. That's how I've described myself. Like I can leave the 10, but like the ingredients are still there. I just am Mormon,
Right.
whether it's former or whatever. Because I'm 41 years old. Like I can't undo. I got baked in the oven with all the ingredients.
The little chocolate chips in there.
Yeah.
Well, and yeah, and this is why it's like a turning back, right? And how they're modeling to not have relationship with those people who are still part of their family. And this is why I think this is so violent. This is like family abuse. This is what it is.
Where's my mom?
It's a whole nother podcast.
I know. Dad's being mean, and where's my mom?
Where the hell is my mom, and where's she been all these years? Who's keeping her locked up? So yeah, so this is why it's so violent. It's violent. This is violent behavior. It's abusive behavior. Topped off with some nice whipped cream. It's like a big turd with some nice whipped cream on top, which is like what your friend said, about the nicest assholes, right? It's like, here's this turd, but we're gonna make it look pretty.
Yeah.
And then
we're gonna wrap it up with like legalese.
And we're gonna turn our back on you. Yeah. And then we're gonna focus on who's still in, and you're a forgotten entity. And so when we think about family systems, how would that ever fall under a healthy family system? It goes against everything we know about healthy families: differentiation, resilience, flexibility, diversity, acceptance, love. Those are the principles that healthy families can, and we say we're very family centric in the church, but it's only as long as you're following daddy's rules, right? Like you're saying. And the minute you don't, then you get this very different treatment. And even when you are following the rules, there's issues that are unhealthy, kind of like what you're saying with female voice, right? And that we don't get to all show up in the same way.
No, we don't.
In the family system. Or if you're gay or if you're transgender, you don't get to show up in the same way. You can only show up in certain ways. So when the scripture of the body of Christ says, it's nice that there's a hand and a leg and a nose and an eye, but we just want a bunch of noses, I guess. Only noses can belong.
A Last She Said It podcast talked about this, and they were talking about the digestive fluid in the where's that? Where's the help process things.
Oh, darn it. Well, this has been an interesting conversation. What are you hoping to either communicate to people who might be listening? What are you hoping people can get from your story? I mean, some people will listen and be very, very much like understand, and commiserate with you. Others maybe will not understand or think this is silly, that you're upset about this. What are you hoping to get out of speaking out about this?
I hope it increases empathy for people who feel like they don't belong in whatever way. And I think a lot of us do at some point or another, and to make efforts to be inclusive. The message that I had to my friend who invited me was, you didn't do anything wrong. Thank you so much for the invitation. And I would hope people would keep inviting, and that this could change, that truly everyone would be welcome. I don't want the church to go away. I just want it to get better. That's all I ever wanted. It's not a safe place for me right now and my family, but that doesn't mean I don't hold love for it and want it to be better. And I hope one day I can show up and sing in the Christmas program. Like, what's wrong with that?
Right. Yeah, what's wrong with that? What's so threatening about that? Let her sing.
I'll sing anyway, but I'd rather sing with you.
And I would love to sing with you, right? And I think that's a commonality we have, is that we have a lot of love for our church community, and we do see the potential it has to really do good in the world and in people's lives. And in many ways it does, but there are such harmful ways it doesn't. And until it's willing to clean out that infection within itself, it will continue to harm. And
I hope people understand why I'm talking about it. It's not because I hate my bishop. I don't. He's a guy doing the best he can. The best in his case sucked. Like it was the crappy best, and it did hurt me. But I'm coming from a good place.
Yeah, these are the things you're talking about are not about one particular person. It's a systemic issue.
Yeah.
It's a systemic issue. And until we're willing to look at it as a system with all the family members involved, all the family members, the excommunicated ones, the disfellowshipped ones, the inactive ones, the super active ones, the progressive ones, the orthodox ones, when we can all sit at the table and make it a space that can be healing, then I think we're talking about things that the Church of Christ would be talking about. I think that's what Christ was talking about. It's very revolutionary. It's difficult. It's a difficult.
Sounds like a restoration, Natasha. Are you speaking of a restoration?
It's like a revolution. And I think there is a lot of spirit in Latter-day Saint folks who want things like this. Like you're saying, I mean, there's me, there's you, there's 500,000 other ones of us out there that are not.
And I have so many friends still involved who want to make it better, and I want to show up for them. Keep going. It's amazing. It's brave. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
And when someone can't stay, that's okay too. But maybe we could still sing together at Christmas.
Maybe we can still sing together, get together for a meal.
Yeah.
No, exactly. Fellowship. What does fellowship actually mean?
Yeah.
So what does ministering really mean? So we put so much caveats on these words that they really lose a lot of their meaning. So thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for sharing your story, your emotion, your vulnerability, your transparency. And I think that a lot of people will resonate with at least parts of your story. I know I do. So, and I wish you the best in this holiday space. And I hope you have lots of other opportunities to sing and be musical and share your talents and your creativity in ways that I'm sure you do lovely at.
Yes. And I'm not a soloist, guys. I'm just like a girl with a guitar. Like there's what's all the fuss?
Right. That's all that. I'm just a girl with a guitar. I'm not that scary.
I'm really not.
I will not lead people into hell and damnation. So.
Not on purpose, anyway.
All right, Evelyn.
Thank you, Natasha.
Have a good one. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Natasha Helfer Podcast. To help keep this podcast going, please consider donating at natashahelfer.com and share this episode. To watch the video of this podcast, you can subscribe to Natasha's channel on YouTube and follow her professional Facebook page at Natasha Helfer, LCMFT, CST-S. You can find all her cool resources at natashahelfer.com. The intro and outro music for these episodes are by Otter Creek.
There is a place where time slows to nature's pace, and there is space there to find yourself in her embrace. Some places should be left alone. So we can always go to the homeland of the heart. And 1,000 years of our human history etched on her canyon walls, alongside Earth's mysteries. Some places should be left alone. So we can always go to the homeland of of the heart, to the homeland of the heart. Deep in our cities, we sleep without her stars, yet still her presence sustains us from afar. Some places should be left alone. No, this is safe now. So we can always go to the homeland of the heart, to the homeland of the heart, to the homeland of the heart.